All right, guys. So we're back to a little bit of notes, and what we're going to cover today is Egyptian history from Cleopatra, who is kind of recognized as the end of the pharaohs, or if we're going to use the adjective form, really the pharaonic period. And we're going to move up to today, 2020. All right, so today is the 22nd day of September, 2020, the year that will never end, apparently. All right, so we already did our do now, and I asked you to identify some of the facts that you may know about Egypt that are not related to anything I've taught you. So ancient Egypt, so no mummies, pyramids, or papyrus, and is also not related to Egyptian geography. And what you're going to realize is, for many students, you're going to realize that you know a lot about ancient Egypt. You know a lot about what I've taught you about geography, the Nile River, the Mediterranean, the Sahara Desert, all that good stuff. But kind of your understanding of Egypt, if it is lacking, which is totally normal. For many people, it is. And I'm here to kind of hopefully fill in that gap a little bit for you. All right. So when we have key terms, you are responsible for them. They will appear on tests, not every single one of them, but we have two here. And the first is a puppet state. And a puppet state is a government whose actions are controlled by another. Think of like a puppet, right? A human being controlling a puppet, or a marionette, or a ventriloquist dummy, as a puppet, right? No different. So a bigger country, usually a bigger country controlling a smaller country that way. And then there's another term that is similar but not the same, and that's protector. This is where a strong country, usually larger, protects a weaker country, but at a cost. Usually that cost is some control of that country. And it may not be direct. It may not be them directly making decisions, but it's a lot of like winks and nods and nudges. Like, I really think, smaller, weaker country, you should be doing this. Wink, wink. And then getting those actions done in exchange for, like I said, that protection. All right. So we're going to talk about the Roman and Byzantine empires within Egypt after Cleopatra's death in 2050 years ago, or the year 30 BCE. And remember, BCE is the same as BC. BC meaning before Christ, BCE meaning before the Common Era. And I told you that as historians, we no longer use the before Christ terminology because of its Christianity, and how it does not relate to a majority of the world. So anyway, after the death of Cleopatra 2,050 years ago, Egypt falls under the control of the Romans. Around 33 CE, approximately the year that we identify as the year Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ of Christian, was crucified, Christianity makes its way to Egypt. It's not very far from where Jesus had been preaching, so this would make perfect sense. It is definitely a close journey, so it would not have taken very long for that information, those teachings to have spread there. And Egypt was a primarily Christian country up until about the mid 600s, and we're going to learn about what happens there. For a brief period of time, about 20 years, the Byzantine Empire ruled Egypt. Now, what you're seeing there is a photograph I took while in Cairo. Now, Cairo is a very unique city because it is, first of all, as we will cover, Egypt is a very significantly Muslim country. So if you guys are unaware, the religion is Islam. People who practice the religion are called Muslims, and you use the term Muslim as an adjective as well. The Muslim world, the Muslim teachings. Okay, so that being said, there is an area in Cairo known as Coptic Cairo. Coptic referring to a form of Christianity. And you will find these ancient churches scattered that you can visit. They're beautiful. And this is from one of them. This is actually, if I remember correctly, I do believe that is Saint Stephen. And you'll find these little alcoves within the church where individual saints are worshipped at, and you will see offerings made to them, donations, etc. All right. So this just kind of gives you an idea, and I understand the map is in French. But what you can see here, as I pull up the little highlighter, you can see the Nile River Delta right here. You can see the Nile, and you can see that this is part of the Roman Empire, right? And that Egypt was definitely part of it. All right, getting rid of that. As I scroll over here and scroll up, you can see it up here as well. All right, this is where it falls within the Byzantine Empire, and I'm going to point out some things. I'm always going to point out other countries or points so you understand it. Once again, the Mediterranean Sea. Here is Egypt. The city of Alexandria is right here. Cairo would be right here, and the Nile River is right here. All of this green is the Byzantine Empire. If you're looking for things you may be familiar with, here is Italy. This is Sicily, the island that the soccer ball to Italy's boot. all part of the country of Italy today. This is Greece. This is Turkey. All right. If you ever need it, it's Greasy Turkey. All right. All right. The Arabs. Now, we use the term Arab sometimes almost interchangeably with the term Muslim, and it's a little bit tricky. The Arabs were a group of people. They were no different than, say, the Italians, right? And they are a tribe, specifically, of people from the Middle East who happen to convert to Islam, following the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. We will get more into the teachings of the major world religions later on in the year, but just so you're aware, this is who we're talking about, and this is what we're talking about. These Arab Muslims, you notice how I kind of identified the tribe and then their religious belief, conquered Egypt in 636 from the Byzantines, and they brought with them Islam. And then they ruled for about 600 years until about 1250 CE. From there, a group of knights who were former slaves known as the Mamluks ruled for about 260, 270 years until they were eventually conquered by the Ottomans in 1517 and ruled until the early 1800s, with a very brief exception in the late 1700s and the early 1800s, during what are we call the Napoleonic Wars, when Napoleon Bonaparte of France tried to conquer the world. Literally, that was his stated goal, was the conquering of the world. But something important happened in this time period, so we're going to keep that in our mind. All right. You can see the spread of Islam starting here. This is the Arabian Peninsula, specifically from the cities of Mecca and Medina. The dark orange that I'm highlighting here and then over here, these are the areas that until Muhammad's death were under Muslim control, or were part of what we call the Muslim Empire or the Islamic world. Now, it's a little tricky as well. So Christianity and Judaism are not governments, right? They have influenced government greatly. In the case of, say, Vatican City, I mean, there's a kind of a tricky loophole there that, it is a Catholic country by design. It is where the Pope lives. But Islam was simultaneously a religion while also being a government in many places. So just keep that in mind. That's why we kind of, in this regard, call it the Muslim world or the Islamic world. By 661, this orange is under the control of the Muslims. And by 750, you'll see this pink is all under control. So they've spread way out. Here's Afghanistan, Pakistan, the edges of India. This is Iran and Iraq today, modern day Syria, once again, Turkey. This is the northern African coast. So you would have Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, and Algeria, blank for a second. And then also within control, you would have here's Portugal, Spain, and then the very, very, very southern edges of the French. And you can see the Franks. That's who we get the name for France from. All right. In 1805, a man by the name of Muhammad Ali, not the very famous boxer from Louisville, who's actually from the European country of Albania, which does have a heavily Arabic or very heavily Muslim cultural heritage, gains control of Egypt. Muhammad Ali worked very diligently to modernize and bring up to speed Egypt, which was kind of left behind. He built things like canals and railroads. He reformed the government. And his dynasty ruled from his taking of power in 1805 until 1952. There's kind of an asterisk there, though. From 1882 to 1952, so the last 70 years of that empire's rule, they were a puppet state of Great Britain. So roughly the first half, they were independent, and then the second half, they were a puppet state of the British. Right. In 1882 and 1952, Britain also claimed as a protectorate, meaning they were responsible for its defense. Egypt did see heavy fighting during both the First and Second World Wars. This is the Great Pyramids, right? And this is an American plane. It's not a British plane. But Egypt saw some real fighting, especially out in the desert. There was a battle known as the Battle of El Alamein, which is the largest tank battle in the history of tank warfare, fought between the Brits, the Nazis, and the Americans. All right, and here's just some photos of the Second World War. These are Scottish soldiers marching along and next to the pyramids. And this is not that long ago, right? We're talking 70, 75 years ago. And you can see even then that the pyramids were not really built up as tourist destinations. If you go there now, this is all concrete and walking paths. There's railings everywhere. not so much during this war period of the 1940s. All right. During this changes, there is these constant blending of cultures. When you go to Egypt today, Egypt is very much an Islamic or Muslim country. It is a Christian country. It is a traditionally Egyptian country. It is an Arabic country. It is African country. It is Greek. It is Roman. It is just a monster blend. When we were there, or when I was there, it was very much explained to us by the Egyptian people that there are no Muslim Egyptians or Christian Egyptians. Everyone is Egyptian, and their ties to these great men and women who built the pyramids, or discovered papyrus. That is the connecting bond to so many people. Now, it's during this time we have some pretty significant discoveries and achievements. All right, the first one is the Rosetta Stone. This one on the left, right? It's a huge black stone, and it has 3 different forms of writing on it. It was discovered in 1799 by French soldiers who were going through ruins of towns and taking the stones and using them to lay roads. Carts travel much easier over nice hard surfaces than over sand. When it is discovered, hieroglyphics, Egyptian writing, which was widely known, we knew about it. We had plenty of examples in tombs and buildings and papyrus scraps, was unlegible or illegible. Sorry, we couldn't read it. And the Rosetta Stone has 3 languages on it, and what it is what we know now. It's a declaration of new rules, new laws. And on it, I'm going to point them out. I'm going to just kind of spin around here. You're going to have Egyptian hieroglyphics. You can see the pieces broken up here, right here. Then you would have come down here, and you would have what we call Coptic Greek. It's kind of like the proper form of Greek. And then down here, you would have what's called Demotic. Demos meaning the people. This is the everyday kind of language of the people, what everyone could read and write. We knew this language, And what we ended up doing is kind of reverse translating. We could translate these, we can match them up. And then we slowly translated this using these as kind of like our key or cipher, right? And because of this is how we know hieroglyphics. This is the only piece ever discovered that had hieroglyphics on it and a known language. So it means without this, we would not understand hieroglyphics. All the writing, all the history of the Egyptians that we understand through their writings would be lost to us. It's also why we get the name Rosetta Stone for the language software, which teaches you new languages, just like this Rosetta Stone does. If you ever want to go see this, it's in a British museum in London. In 1869, which we're going to talk about in depth, so I'm going to kind of go through this, the Suez Canal is open and it connects the Red and Mediterranean Seas. It's an extremely important shipping route. You can see it cutting right through here. Red Sea is easy to remember. It kind of looks like a weird crab's claw. All right. We'll skip all this. You're going to see this in a video, so no big deal. And you'll see this as well. All right. In 1952, the Egyptians revolt against the British and the protectorate that they have installed, running Muhammad Ali's dynasty. And in June of 1953, a man by the name of Muhammad Naguib, that's him on the left, declares an independent Egyptian republic, and he is elected the president. He does not rule for long, and in 1956, this man on here, his name is Gamal Abdel Nasser, is elected president, and he rules for 14 years. He modernizes Egypt further. He focuses on giving land to the poor. He focuses on education for all children within the country. He does wage a few unsuccessful wars, specifically against the Jewish nation of Israel, who was Egypt's neighbor, and they fail. And he aligns the Egyptian people, the Egyptian government, closely with the Soviet communist government of the Soviet Union, the USSR, kind of America's enemy from the end of the Second World War in 1945 until roughly 1991, 1997. We call that time period the Cold War, where the democracy, the capitalism of the United States is kind of at odds internationally in the whole world with the communism and dictatorship of the Soviet Union. We'll talk more about the Cold War later on. In 1970, Nasser dies in office, and he's replaced by this man, Anwar Sadat. Many people think he looks like Splinter from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies. He switches gears. He cuts ties with the Soviet Union. He aligns Egypt quite closely with the United States. He makes peace with Israel, another big change. And since that day, Israel and Egypt have been close allies within the Middle East. And however, because of his closeness with the Jewish state of Israel, this upset some hardline Arabs some hardline Muslim Arabs, and he was assassinated in 1981. If you go to the museum or the Library of Alexandria, the world famous library, there's a huge museum complex in the lower floors, and in it are some of the artifacts from Anwar Sadat's life, including the military uniform he was wearing before his assassination. All right, here are the Camp David Accords. There's American President Jimmy Carter, Anwar Sadat, and Prime Minister Begin from Israel. And when Sadat is killed, he is replaced by this man, Hosni Mubarak, very close with Anwar Sadat. And he ruled Egypt from 1981 until what we're going to see was what we call the Arab Spring Revolution. Under his rule, there was a rise of terrorism within Egypt. He crushed freedoms of the individuals. However, unsurprisingly, he and his friends did very well in this country that he was running. Even though on paper, Egypt was a democracy, it was not. Every election he won, every election he was not running, his friends were winning. It was very corrupt. This is Hosni Mubarak on the left right here, Anwar Sadat. This is the day that Sadat was assassinated. All right. In January 2011, a popular revolution and uprising springs up. It starts in the neighboring country of Tunisia, or the nearby country of Tunisia, and we call it the Arab Spring revolutions. And the main cause is these countries in Northern Africa, in the Middle East, tended to have limited economic opportunities for people, especially younger people. So there's this protest, and the goal is to change the presidency to kind of make Egypt work for everybody. We now look back on them, almost a decade later, and say that these protests have failed. The country still struggles. There is significant unemployment. Terrorism is still an issue. And to kind of illuminate this, a few years ago when I was in Egypt, I went to a pizza place, right? And it was a pizza place, gas station, car wash, auto repair center. Very nice. And it was called Pizza Hut, not Pizza Hut. And we got talking to the owner, my wife and I. He spoke English quite well. His family had lived in the United States and Egypt. And he was explaining how prior to the Arab Spring Revolution, he goes, the kids would go to school, the lights would stay on, the garbage would get picked up, the water would run. You didn't have rights, but things worked. And he said, since then, he goes, yeah, I guess you have some more rights, but in reality, the garbage doesn't get picked up. Schools don't open every day. He goes, and so what is better? And it's kind of an interesting way to look at it. We tend to look at, democracy as a good thing, but for everybody, that may not always be the case. All right, some signs, 30 years referring to the 30 years of Hosni Mubarak's rule being too many. Now, Hosni Mubarak was put on trial. As you can see, this is an Egyptian courtroom. This is real. And people who are on trial are placed into a courtroom. And if you look here, right, I'm going to bring up a little right in there. There's our boy Hosni, right? And if you look at him again, there he was hanging out. He became very, quote unquote, very sick all of a sudden. He had to be in a hospital bed. You can see that in the courtroom, he was kind of just hanging, wearing his nice jacket. His eyes may or may not be open most of the time behind those sunglasses. He wasn't going to fall asleep in court. All right. So what is going on in Egypt right now? Its current president is a man by the name of Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and he has tried to gain absolute power. You're going to do some work about that. Tourism is all but stopped. Significantly, the best way to put it is that when I went to Egypt, I stayed in a beautiful 12-story hotel with 300 rooms, and out of those 300 rooms, 3 were occupied. Unemployment sits around 12%, meaning 12% of the population that is able and willing to work cannot find jobs. The economy is seemingly broken. People are relatively hopeless that this will improve, and they have little faith in the government to become an effective government. Right? We can skip this as your closing. No big deal. Obviously, a little bit weird with the 2020. All right. I hope that works for you guys. You're going to have quite a bit of work, so make sure that you read the post carefully. You follow the order that I've laid out for you, please and thank you. And that's it. If you need anything, obviously, as always, send me an email, make a comment, raise your hand, and I'll be happy to help you. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.